There is a powder. It is older than this country, and it kills any bug that crawls across it. Ants, roaches, fleas, bed bugs, silverfish, earwigs, even the weevils that ruin a barrel of grain. It costs about $1 a pound, maybe less. And the man at the hardware store will walk you right past it to sell you a $40 bottle of spray that does half the job. I know this powder. My grandfather knew it. His father knew it before him. We kept it in a wooden bin in the granary, and we used it long before the English world ever printed a label on a bag. So let me tell you plainly, the way a neighbor tells a neighbor over a fence. The thing they are selling you in the bright yellow can was never necessary, not for what most folks fight in their kitchen and their bedroom and their barn. Stay with me, because right around the middle of this, I'm going to show you exactly how to clear a whole room of fleas or ants for less than the price of a cup of coffee, the same way my people have done it for as long as anyone can remember. But first, do me one small favor. Tell me down in the comments what state you are in and what bug is giving you trouble right now. Ants, roaches, fleas, bed bugs, just type it. I read them, and the bug you are fighting tells me a lot about how you should use what I am about to show you. I grew up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. We did not have an exterminator's truck pull into the lane. We did not have a man in a uniform spraying along the foundation every spring for a fee. We had this powder, a hand crank duster, and the knowledge handed down from the old ones who could not afford to lose a single bin of wheat to bugs. And here is the part that should make you a little angry. The reason you have never heard of this is not because it does not work. It is because nobody can build a big company selling something that costs $1 and lasts for years. There is no salesman knocking on doors for a product you only have to buy once. Let me tell you what it is, and then I will tell you exactly how to use it, and then near the end, I will tell you the one trick that almost everybody gets wrong, the trick that decides whether this powder works like a miracle or does nothing at all. The powder is called diatomaceous earth. Now, do not let that long word scare you off. It is a soft, white, chalky dust. You can hold a handful and it feels like flour. It looks harmless. To you, it is harmless. To us, to our chickens, to our dogs, to our children, it is just dust. But to a bug, it is a field of broken glass. Here is what it actually is. And this is the part that gave me chills the first time my grandfather explained it. Sitting on an overturned bucket in the granary with the morning light coming through the boards. Millions of years ago, long before any of us, the lakes and seas were full of tiny living things called diatoms. They were so small you could not see a single one. Smaller than a grain of salt, and each one built itself a little shell, a hard shell, made of the same stuff that glass and sand are made of, silica. When those tiny creatures died, they sank to the bottom, layer upon layer upon layer, for ages without counting, and those little glass shells piled up and pressed down and turned into great soft white beds of stone. Men dig it out of the ground in places like Nevada and California, and they grind it into a fine powder. So when you hold diatomaceous earth in your hand, you are holding the fossilized shells of countless little creatures that lived before the days of Noah. That is not a figure of speech. That is what it is. Now here is why it kills. A bug, an ant, a roach, a flea, a bed bug does not have skin like you and me. It has a hard outer shell, what they call an exoskeleton. And to keep from drying out, that shell is coated in a thin layer of waxy oil. That wax is the bug's raincoat. It holds the water inside its little body. Without that waxy layer, the bug dries up and dies, the same way a worm dries up on the hot sidewalk. When that bug crawls across the diatomaceous earth, those microscopic glass shells, sharper than any razor at that tiny size, scratch and scrape and cut right through that waxy coat. They sponge the oil away. They open 1,000 tiny scratches, and then the water leaves the bug, slowly, surely. The bug dehydrates from the inside out, and within a day or two, sometimes a few hours, it is dead. There is no poison in it. There is no nerve agent. There is no smell. The bug cannot grow resistant to it the way it grows resistant to chemical sprays, and this is the part the chemical companies do not want sitting in your mind. A roach can become immune to a poison over a few generations. That is a real thing, well documented. The University of Purdue had researchers find roaches that survived sprays that would have wiped out their grandparents, but a roach can never become immune to having its raincoat scratched off. You cannot evolve your way out of physics. A bug cannot grow a shell that does not get cut by glass. It simply does not happen. That is why this works on any bug with a shell. That is why I told you at the start it kills any bug that crawls. It is not a clever claim. It is just what the powder does. Now, the people in the lab coats have known this for a long while too, even if they do not shout about it. Researchers at land-grant universities, the agricultural schools, have tested diatomaceous earth against stored grain pests for decades. They found that a light coating mixed into stored wheat could kill better than 90% of the weevils and beetles that try to live in it, with no chemical residue at all on the grain you eat. The old USDA bulletins talked about dusts like this for protecting stored crops long before your grandmother was born. We did not need the bulletin. We had the granary. But it is a comfort, is it not, to know the science finally caught up to what the plain folks were already doing. So let me tell you how we used it and how you can use it this very weekend. The first rule, and write this on your heart, is that there are two kinds of this powder, and you must get the right one. There is food-grade diatomaceous earth, and there is pool-grade, sometimes called filter-grade. You want food-grade, always. Only food-grade. It will say food-grade right on the bag. Pool-grade has been cooked at a very high heat for use in swimming pool filters, and that cooking changes the silica into a form that is hard on the lungs. You do not want that one in your house. You do not want to breathe it, so when you go to buy, you look for those two words, food grade. If it does not say it, you set it back down and you find one that does. Food grade is the kind sold for putting in animal feed and grain. It is the kind we used around the chickens and in the bins. It is gentle enough that folks even mix a small spoon of it into things, though I am not here to give you health advice. I am here to tell you how to kill bugs, and for that, food grade is your friend. Now, how do you put it down? Less is more. I am going to say that again later because it is the single most important thing, but plant it now. Less is more. A bug will not walk through a big white mound of powder. It sees it or feels it and it goes around. What you want is a fine, thin film, so thin you can barely see it. A haze of dust across the surface where the bugs travel. The best tool for this costs a few dollars. It is a little plastic squeeze duster, sometimes called a puffer or a bulb duster. You fill it with the powder and you give it a gentle squeeze, and it breathes out a thin cloud that settles into a fine layer. You can also use an empty squeeze ketchup bottle. We used a hand crank duster, the kind made for dusting the garden, but a cheap bulb does the job for inside the house. You go along the baseboards, behind the stove, behind the refrigerator, under the sink where the pipes come through the wall, in the cracks where the wall meets the floor. Those gaps are the roads the bugs travel at night, and you are laying your line across every road. For ants, you find the line they march along, and you trace it back toward where they come in. A gap in the threshold, a crack by the window, a seam in the foundation. You lay a thin band right across their path, and right at the opening, they walk through it, they carry it back on their bodies into the nest, and it spreads to the others. You are not just killing the scouts on your counter, you are reaching the colony you cannot see. For fleas, and I will come back to this because it is one of the things this powder does best, you treat the carpet and the cracks in the floor and the pet's bedding. For bed bugs, you treat the seams of the mattress, the box spring, the cracks in the bed frame, and the baseboards around the bed. For roaches, behind every appliance, inside the lower cabinets, around the water heater, anywhere it is dark and warm and near water. Now here is the part that separates folks who say it did not work from folks who swear by it for the rest of their lives. It has to stay dry. Remember why it kills. It scratches the bug and the bug dries out. If the powder itself gets wet, it clumps, and wet powder does not scratch and does not stay airy. and a damp bug holds its water better. So you keep it out of the rain, you keep it away from the mop water. If you're treating a damp basement corner, you let it dry first, and if a treated spot gets wet, you sweep up the clumps and lay down a fresh thin film once it is dry again. That is the whole secret of failure. People sprinkle it once, it gets damp, nothing happens, and they say the old powder is nonsense. No, the powder's fine. The bug just needs to walk across it dry. And it does not work in an afternoon like a spray that drops a roach on its back in 10 seconds. This is patient work. This is the plain way. You lay it down, and over a day, 2 days, a week, the population falls and falls until it is gone, and it stays gone because the powder is still sitting there dry and waiting for the next bug that comes along. A chemical spray dries up and quits in a few days. This dust keeps working for as long as it stays dry. Months inside a drywall void, years. Now think for one moment about what that means for the people who sell the sprays. A product that keeps working for months on its own is a product you do not buy again. There is no repeat sale. There is no service plan. There is no truck that comes around every quarter. You can see, can you not, why nobody is putting this dollar bag on a television commercial. There is no fortune in it. The fortune is in the bottle you have to keep replacing, and in the contract you sign to have a man come spray your foundation 4 times a year for the rest of your life. I am not saying every one of those men is a crook. Plenty are honest workers. But the system they work inside is built on one idea, and the idea is that you should stay dependent, that you should never learn the simple thing, that the knowledge my grandfather kept in a granary should stay forgotten because forgotten knowledge is good for business. We never forgot it. And now you will not either. And if you want the full picture, every old remedy, every storage secret laid out the way the plain people kept it, I want to tell you about something we put together for exactly that reason. It is called the Garden Blueprint, and it collects old-fashioned pest cures that cost pennies alongside Amish soil and storage secrets for bigger yields, the same knowledge that kept our pantry full and our bins clean for generations. We also put together the Harvest Blueprint and a combined Complete Garden Field Edition, all available for $97 through the link in the description below. If this powder is the kind of thing that makes sense to you, those books will feel like sitting down with the old ones who never forgot. But right now, let us get back to the powder and exactly how to use it this very weekend. All right. Here is the thing I promised you. How to clear a whole room of fleas or ants for less than a cup of coffee. I will take fleas first, because fleas are misery, and because this is where this powder truly shines. If you have ever had fleas come into the house on a dog or a cat, you know the despair of it. You bomb the house with a fogger. You vacuum. You wash everything. And 2 weeks later, they are back, biting your ankles, because the foggers and sprays kill the grown fleas, but the eggs and the young are tucked down deep in the carpet, waiting. The flea life goes in a circle, and a chemical that hits one part of the circle leaves the rest to come around again. Here is the plain way. First, you vacuum the whole room, slow, especially along the edges, under the furniture, where the floor meets the wall. The vacuuming pulls up some of the eggs, and it also stirs the young ones to move, which makes them more likely to crawl across what you are about to lay down. Then you empty that vacuum outside right away, because the eggs can hatch in the bag. Then you take your food-grade powder, and you dust it lightly over the whole carpet, not a pile, a haze. You can take a stiff broom or a brush and work it gently down into the fibers, down to the base of the carpet where the young fleas live. You do the pet's bed the same way. You do the cracks in any wood floor. You do under the couch cushions if the pet lies there. And then, here is the hard part for most folks. You leave it, you let it sit, 2 days, 3 is better. As the young fleas develop and move through the carpet, they cross those glass shells, and their soft little bodies dry out, and the circle is broken. After a few days, you vacuum it all up, and you do the whole thing once more about a week later to catch any stragglers that hatch from eggs the first round missed. That is it. A bag of powder you already have most of left over, a broom you own, and a vacuum. For the cost of a cup of coffee and powder, you break a flea problem that the fogger could not touch, and you did not spray a single poison where your grandchildren crawl and your dog sleeps. Now ants Ants are an army with a hidden headquarters. The ones you see on the counter are scouts, the foragers. Killing them with a wet wipe feels good, but does nothing, because the queen and the nest are somewhere you cannot reach, pumping out more. So you do not fight the scouts. You use the scouts. You find their trail. You follow it to where they squeeze in, that hairline crack by the back door, the gap under the window where the caulk pulled away, the seam where the pipe enters, and you lay a thin line of the powder right across the trail and right at that entry point, and you puff a little into the crack itself. The ants will not all die on the spot. Some will walk through it and carry the dust back on their legs and their bodies into the nest, and there, in the dark, it touches others, and it does its quiet work on the colony you never see. Within a week or two, the trail thins and dies out. You keep a thin line at the entries, dry, and they do not come back, because every ant that tries to walk in has to cross the glass. For a few cents of powder, you reach a nest you could never dig to. Now, I told you to tell me your state in the comments, and here is why that matters. A reader down in Florida or Texas or the Deep South is fighting a different war than a reader up north. Down there you have the year-round heat, the fire ants, the palmetto bugs, the humidity that fights against you because it keeps things damp, and this powder hates damp. Up north we fight the seasonal invasions, the ants in spring, the mice and their fleas in fall, the cluster flies. So when you tell me where you are telling me what you are up against, and you are helping the next reader too. So go ahead and type it if you have not. State and bug. It takes 10 seconds. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking, this is fine for somebody starting fresh, somebody with a new house and clean floors, but my place is established. I have had this same house 30, 40 years. I have carpet that is older than my grandkids. I have a finished basement, plaster walls, furniture. I am not about to tear apart. Does this even help me? It helps you more. Let me tell you why. And let me give you something you can do this very weekend on the house you already have with nothing special bought. An old, established house is a paradise for bugs because it has had decades to settle and crack and open up little roads in the woodwork. Every gap in an old baseboard, every space where a floorboard has shrunk, every spot behind a built-in cabinet that has not moved since the Eisenhower years, that is a bug highway. New houses are sealed tight and boring. Old houses are full of secret passages. And those secret passages are exactly where this powder does its best work, because once you puff a little dry powder back into those voids, it sits there in the dark, dry forever, killing for years, and you never have to touch it again. So here is your weekend job, and it costs you almost nothing. Walk your house slow, like an inspector, down low where the floor meets the wall. Take a flashlight. You are looking for the gaps. Behind the stove, pull it out. Look at that wall. Behind the refrigerator, same. Under the kitchen sink, look where the pipes go through into the dark. In the basement, along the sill where the wood frame sits on the foundation. Around the water heater, behind the toilet where it meets the floor. Every one of those spots, you give a gentle puff of food-grade powder into the crack. Along the seam, a thin line, not a pile. You are seeding every hidden road in your old house with a thing the bugs cannot cross and cannot grow used to. Then, take the outside threshold of every door and the bottom track of the windows you can reach and lay a thin line there too on the inside where the weather will not wash it. You have just drawn a quiet boundary around the whole house. Anything that tries to walk in has to cross the glass. You did not move a single piece of heavy furniture you did not have to. You did not tear up your old carpet. You did not buy a machine. You took a few dollars of dust and a flashlight, and you turned 40 years of cracks from the enemy's advantage into yours. And I will tell you something my grandmother did, because the old women knew this best. She kept a small cloth sack of this powder up on the shelf in the pantry, and twice a year she would dust a thin film across the back of the shelves behind the jars and let it sit. We never had a weevil in the flour. We never had a moth in the cornmeal. Not once that I remember. The mills and the markets lost barrels to bugs. Our pantry held because of a handful of dust and a woman who knew what her mother taught her. You can do the very same. A thin film on the back of your pantry shelves, behind where the cans sit. in the corners. Let it stay. It is food grade. It is around your food the way it was meant to be. And the little beetles and moths that get into stored flour and rice and oats, the ones that ruin a whole bag and make you throw it out, they cross that film and they do not survive to lay the next batch of eggs. Now, let me come back to the thing I told you was the most important of all. The one trick almost everybody gets wrong, the difference between a miracle and a disappointment. This is the finale. This is the thing the old ones knew in their hands without ever putting it into words, and only lately have the patient folks with microscopes proven exactly why it is true. Less is more, much less than you think. When most people first try this powder, they pour it on. They make thick white lines like they are drawing chalk on a sidewalk, big heaps of it in the corners. They figure more powder, more dead bugs. It only makes sense. It is exactly wrong. The researchers who study this for stored grain and for household pests found something that turns common sense on its head. A heavy pile of the powder actually kills slower and worse than a barely visible dusting. And here is why. And it is so simple, it is almost funny. A bug will not walk through a thick pile. It feels it the way you would feel a snowdrift across the doorway, and it turns and goes around, and it never gets the full coating, but a fine, thin film, so light you can hardly see it, the bug does not even notice it is there. It strolls right across, casual as you please, and picks up the powder all over its body and its legs and its underside, every part dragging through that invisible haze of glass. The thin layer coats the bug far more completely than the heap it walked around. There is more. Those tiny shells work by their sharp edges and their thirst for oil. In a thin, even film, every particle is exposed and dry and ready, each one a little blade standing up. In a thick, wet-packed pile, the particles clump together and dull each other and hold moisture, and the bug that does cross it picks up clumps instead of cutting edges. The science folks measured this. A thin application laid down the right way killed faster and more completely than piling it on, sometimes dramatically so. The grain researchers found their best kill came not from drowning the wheat in dust, but from the lightest, even coating that touched every kernel. So the whole trick, is restraint. Lay it so thin that a stranger walking into your kitchen would never see it. If you can clearly see a white line, you have used too much. You want a haze, a breath of dust, a film that catches the light only if you tilt your head. That is the layer that kills. That is why my grandfather used that little crank duster instead of just shaking the bag. The duster lays down a whisper of powder. The bag dumps a drift. He knew, the way the old ones knew so many things, by watching and remembering across the years, that the gentle hand did the better work. He could not have told you about silica and exoskeletons and oil layers. But he knew to dust light, and the science that finally caught up only proved the plain man right. Think about that for a moment. The expensive way, the heavy way, the more is better way, that is the modern way, the English way, if you will forgive me. Buy more, use more, spray more, spend more. And it works worse. The plain way, the patient, sparing, careful way, the way that uses the least, works best. There is a lesson in that powder that goes well past killing bugs. But I promised I would not preach, so I will just leave it sitting there for you to pick up if you want it. Let me give you the last few practical things so you have the whole of it, nothing held back. How often do you reapply? Indoors, in a dry spot that does not get disturbed. Almost never. It keeps working until it gets wet or swept away. In a spot that gets cleaned, lay it fresh after each cleaning. Outdoors, after every rain, because the rain washes it and clumps it. A dry covered porch holds it a long while. An open step needs it again after a storm. Is it safe around the dog and the cat and the grandchildren? The food grade kind, yes, it is the same grade put in animal feed, but use sense. You do not want anybody, two-legged or four-legged, breathing a cloud of any fine dust. So when you puff it, do it gently, let it settle, and keep the little ones and the pets out of the room until the haze has come down and laid flat. Once it is settled into the carpet and the cracks, it is just dust. We raised children and animals around it our whole lives. What about wet basements and damp crawl spaces? That is the powder's weakness, plain and simple. In a truly damp place, it loses its bite because it absorbs the moisture instead of the bug's oil. So in those spots, you do what you can to dry the area first, a fan, better airflow, and you favor the higher, drier ledges and the cracks up off the wet floor. And one more, because folks always ask, will it hurt the good bugs, the ladybugs, the bees, the spiders that eat other pests, out in the open garden, used heavy and careless? It can, because it does not know a good bug from a bad one. So outdoors, you use it with a careful hand, only where the pests travel, not broadcast across blooming flowers where the bees work. Inside the house, this is not much of a worry, but it is the honest answer, and I would rather give you the honest answer than sell you a miracle with no flaws. The plain way is honest about its limits. That is part of why I trust it. So there it is. The whole of it. The same knowledge that sat in our granary in a wooden bin, the same dust my grandmother kept in a cloth sack on the pantry shelf, the same thin, careful dusting my grandfather laid with his little crank duster, handed to you now, complete, with nothing left out and nothing to buy from me. A bag of food-grade diatomaceous earth costs about what one of those fancy bottles costs, except the bottle empties in a month and the bag lasts you years. One bag will likely outlive the problem, sit in your closet, and be ready the next time and the time after that. Now think about what you have actually got back here. It is not just a way to kill ants. It is a thing that was quietly taken from you. For generations, the outside world was sold the dependence it never needed, taught to reach for the can in the contract and the quarterly truck, taught to believe that something this important must surely be complicated and expensive and beyond a regular person. And all the while, the plain people just kept using the dust because we never got the message that we were supposed to forget it. You are not the kind of person who likes being upsold. I can tell because you are still here, all the way at the end, while the folks who want the quick, expensive answer clicked away long ago. You are the kind who would rather know the real thing, the simple thing, the thing that works because it has always worked, and keep your money in your own pocket where it belongs. That is the oldest plain value there is. Not cheapness, stewardship, not wasting what the good Lord already provided, free and lying in the ground when somebody wants to charge you $40 a bottle for less. So, here is what I ask of you. Down in the comments, tell me your state and the bug you are fighting. I meant it at the start, and I mean it now. Type it out. If you are in Georgia battling fire ants, say so. If you are in Ohio with fleas off the barn, cat, say so. If you are in Arizona with scorpions and roaches, say so. I read them, and other folks read them, and your one line might be the very thing that helps a stranger 2 states over. Do not just think it, write it. This audience is shy about commenting, and I am asking you plainly, leave the comment. And if this is the kind of knowledge you want more of, the practical, plain way of doing things that the modern world forgot on purpose, then come along with us. Not to support a channel, to join a table of folks who are taking back the old, simple knowledge one piece at a time, the things our grandparents knew and the salesman hoped we would forget, because next time I am going to show you the plant my people grew right by the kitchen door, one common plant that kept the flies and the mosquitoes off the porch all summer without a single spray, and the particular way you have to bruise its leaves to make it work, which almost nobody does, right? It is sitting in half the garden centers in America, and folks walk right past it. Keep the powder dry, use it thin, and do not let them sell you what your own 2 hands can do. I'm Eli, and I hope you'll stay with me a moment longer inside the Amish field circle. I continue this video, the deeper room-by-room method, and you can ask me your own question with a real person, me, answering you myself. You won't be doing this alone. So many old ways growers like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel anytime. If this helped you, do stay with me and subscribe. I have many more simple, old-fashioned remedies and tricks like this one waiting for you right here. There is always something more to discover.